G'day you mob, settle in around the fire because I've got a yarn that'll knock your socks clean off. Picture this, the red heart of Australia, bone dry and stretching to the horizon like a rust-coloured canvas painted by the gods themselves. But here's the thing that'll make your head spin faster than a willy-willy in a dust storm. 100 million years ago, where you see nothing but sand and scrub today, there was water. Not just any water, mind you, a bloody great inland sea called the Eromanga that covered most of this sunburnt continent like a massive bathtub. The ghosts of this lost world still whisper their secrets from beneath the red dirt, and tonight we're diving deep into Australia's most extraordinary underwater graveyard. Now, I've been wandering this bush for the better part of 6 decades, and I've seen things that'd make a city slicker's eyes water. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for the day I first laid eyes on the bones of a Kronosaurus. Stone the flaming crows. This prehistoric sea monster had a head the size of a small car and teeth like bloody great bananas. We're talking about a creature that could snap a modern-day great white shark in half like a dry biscuit. And that's just one of the titans that ruled the Eromanga's depths. There were long-necked plesiosaurs that moved like underwater dragons, dolphin-shaped ichthyosaurs that could outrun anything in today's oceans, and flying reptiles with wingspans bigger than a Cessna. Fair dinkum, it was like Mother Nature had a few too many tinnies and decided to populate the seas with her wildest dreams. But here's where it gets really interesting, Cobber. The old Aboriginal fellas, the traditional owners who've been connected to this land since time immemorial, they've got stories in their dream time that some reckon might be echoes of this ancient sea. Now, I'm not saying these yarns are literal memories passed down through 100 million years. That'd be madder than a cut snake. But when you hear tales of giant serpents with necks like emus and water creatures with teeth bigger than boomerangs, well, it makes an old bushman wonder if maybe, just maybe, these stories preserved something from when the ancestors first stumbled across these fossilized sea monsters weathering out of the rocks. Tonight, we're going walkabout through deep time, following the fossil trail from the days when this desert was an ocean teeming with monsters, right up to the modern-day treasure hunters who are still pulling these ancient ghosts from their sandy graves. Every grain of sand beneath your feet was once part of that sea floor. Every red rock formation around us holds secrets that paleontologists are only just beginning to unlock. The Eromanga may have vanished, but its ghosts are everywhere. In the fossils that surface after every big rain, in the stories told around campfires for thousands of years, and in the cutting-edge laboratories where scientists are using space-age technology to peer into the minds of creatures that died before flowers existed on Earth. So grab yourself a cuppa, keep your ears pricked, and let this old desert rat take you on a journey through Australia's most incredible lost world. This isn't just another fossils and rocks story, mate. This is about the deep magic that connects us to the ancient past, the way traditional knowledge and modern science can dance together like partners at a country ball, and the ongoing adventure of discovery that's happening right now in the red center of our continent. The Eromanga Sea may be gone, but its story is still being written, one fossil at a time, one discovery at a time, one yarn at a time. And tonight, around this virtual campfire, we're adding our own chapter to that never-ending story. Now, to understand how this bloody great sea came to be, we need to wrap our heads around something that'll make your brain work harder than a one-legged cat in a sandbox. Deep time, mate. I'm talking about the Cretaceous period between 145 and 66 million years ago, when the world was a very different beast altogether. The dinosaurs were having their heyday, stomping around like they owned the joint, and that massive supercontinent Pangaea had already cracked apart like a dropped billabong cake. Australia was still snuggled up to Antarctica like a joey in its mother's pouch, but she was starting to drift away, slow as a Sunday afternoon, but unstoppable as death and taxes. You see, Cobber, around 120 million years ago, Mother Nature decided to throw one hell of a curveball at our continent. A perfect storm of geological mayhem was brewing. The polar ice caps were melting faster than butter on a bushfire shovel. The tectonic plates were shifting and groaning like an old windmill in a gale, and the Central Australian basin was sinking lower than a snake's belly in a wagon rut. Dr. James Harding from the University of Queensland, now there's a bloke who knows his rocks from his hard places, he reckons it was like watching a massive geological jigsaw puzzle rearrange itself in slow motion. The ocean didn't just politely knock on Australia's door, it bloody well kicked it down and moved in like it owned the place. This wasn't just any ordinary sea, mind you. The Eromanga was what the science fellas call an epicontinental sea, a shallow inland ocean that spread across the continent like spilled tea on a camp table. At its deepest, it was only about 40 meters down. You could probably hold your breath and touch the bottom in some spots if you were game enough to try. But what it lacked in depth, it made up for in sheer bloody size. At its peak, this watery monster covered about 60% of what we now call Australia. Imagine that, more than half our continent underwater, teeming with life that'd make your worst nightmares look like a Sunday school picnic. The climate back then was nothing like the harsh, dry outback we know today. Dr. Eleanor Whitman from the Queensland Museum, and she's forgotten more about ancient seas than most blokes will ever know. She describes it as a tropical paradise that'd make the Whitsundays look like a puddle. The Eromanga was relatively cool for its time, rich with nutrients flowing down from the surrounding land masses, creating a complex food web that supported some of the most incredible creatures ever to grace our planet. On the shores, massive forests of conifers and tree ferns towered like green cathedrals, while overhead, pterosaurs ruled the skies with wings that could blot out the sun. For roughly 30 million years, that's longer than humans have even existed, mate, the Eromanga Sea held court over Central Australia like some ancient aquatic emperor. Fish swam where now red dirt stretches to the horizon. Massive marine reptiles hunted in waters that now support nothing but the occasional wandering wedgie and the odd mob of roos. It was a world so alien, so completely different from anything we can imagine today, that it might as well have been on another planet entirely. The sea was master of all it surveyed, and what it surveyed was bloody enormous. But as the old saying goes, all good things must come to an end, and even the mighty Eromanga wasn't immune to the passage of time. The same tectonic forces that had invited the ocean inland slowly began to show it the door. The continent started rising like bread in a camp oven, imperceptibly at first, then with increasing urgency. The waters began their long retreat, leaving behind muddy flats that would eventually become the red heart of our continent. It was like watching a massive bathtub drain, except this bathtub was the size of half a continent and took millions of years to empty. The sea didn't disappear overnight. It took its sweet time, gradually giving up its grip on the land until finally, reluctantly, it released its hold on Australia forever. But the sea didn't leave quietly, Cobber. Oh no, it left behind something far more precious than gold or opals. It left us the fossilized remains of the most incredible menagerie of monsters that ever drew breath on this planet. Picture yourself floating in those ancient waters, 100 million years ago, with the Cretaceous sun filtering down through the murky depths like liquid amber. Above you, the surface shimmers with possibility. Below, shadows move with deadly purpose. You're not alone in this primordial soup. You're sharing the water with creatures so massive, so perfectly adapted for killing, that they make modern great whites look like minnows in a farm dam. The first beasts to catch your eye would be the Plesiosaurs. And what a sight they were, mate. Imagine taking a sea turtle, stretching its neck out longer than a telegraph pole, giving it flippers like giant paddles, and then cranking up its predatory instincts to 11. Some of these beauties had necks that could extend 7 meters, longer than a bloody giraffe, allowing them to strike at prey from impossible distances like aquatic cobras. Dr. Michael Chen, who spent more time studying these beasties than most blokes spend watching the footy, reckons they moved through the water like underwater dragons, all grace and deadly intent. In 2022, near Richmond in Queensland, they found an almost complete skeleton of one of these long-necked killers, an elasmosaurid that some bright spark nicknamed Molly. Now, finding a complete plesiosaur skull is rarer than hen's teeth, but this beauty had everything intact, giving us our first proper look at how these ancient serpents actually worked their deadly magic. While the plesiosaurs were gliding through the depths like nightmare swans, another group of marine reptiles was tearing through the water with the speed of a bush telegraph, the ichthyosaurs. These fellas looked like dolphins that had been pumped full of steroids and sent to anger management classes. With their torpedo-shaped bodies, massive flippers, and eyes the size of dinner plates, the biggest peepers of any animal that ever lived, they were the Formula One racers of the ancient seas. The Platypterygius australis, found around Boulia in Queensland, could reach 7 meters in length and had the kind of speed that'd make a barramundi weep with envy. Some of these fossils are so well preserved, they still show impressions of skin and soft tissue, giving us a window into creatures that were warm-blooded killing machines 100 million years before mammals figured out how to be properly terrifying. But if the plesiosaurs were the elegant assassins and the ichthyosaurs were the speed demons, then the pliosaurs were the absolute lords of destruction. And at the top of this nightmare food chain sat the king of them all, Kronosaurus queenslandicus, a creature so monumentally terrifying that it makes every monster movie look like a children's puppet show. This beast had a skull 2.5 meters long, bigger than most people's bedrooms, packed with teeth the size of ripe bananas and powered by jaw muscles that could crush a modern car like a beer can. The whole animal stretched 11 meters from nose to tail, roughly the length of a city bus, but infinitely more deadly. Dr. Sarah Williams from the Australian Museum put it best when she said this monster was the apex predator of the Eromanga, a creature that ate other marine reptiles for breakfast, lunch and dinner, leaving behind bite marks on fossils that tell tales of prehistoric violence that'd make your blood run cold. The terror wasn't confined to the water either. Soaring above the Eromanga Sea were flying reptiles that looked like something out of Aboriginal Dreamtime stories, pterosaurs with wingspans that'd make a Cessna pilot jealous. In 2021, a former avocado farmer in Queensland, because it's always the farmers who find the best stuff out here, discovered the most complete pterosaur fossil ever found in Australia. They called it Helischia petersini, and this flying nightmare had wings spanning 7 meters, making it one of the largest creatures ever to take to Australian skies. Dr. Robert Thompson, who studied the fossil, reckons watching this beast in action would have been like seeing a dragon made real, a graceful, silent predator that could pluck fish from the surface with surgical precision, then disappear into the prehistoric sky like a ghost with wings. These weren't just random monsters scattered through the sea like a child's toy box. They were part of a complex ecosystem that functioned like a finely tuned killing machine. The smaller fish fed the larger fish, which fed the marine reptiles, which occasionally became meals for the truly massive predators like Kronosaurus. It was a world where size mattered, where speed could mean the difference between life and death, and where the biggest teeth usually won the argument. For millions of years, this underwater colosseum played host to evolutionary battles that shaped life on Earth, creating creatures so perfectly adapted to their watery world that they dominated the seas like aquatic emperors. And then, like everything else in deep time, they vanished, leaving behind only their bones and the stories those bones tell to anyone patient enough to listen. Now here's where things get really interesting, and I mean hair on the back of your neck standing up interesting. When the first Aboriginal people arrived on this continent at least 65,000 years ago, and probably much earlier if you ask me, the Eromanga Sea had been bone dry for millions of years. The last of those ancient marine monsters had been fossilized longer than most mountain ranges had existed. But here's the thing that'll make you scratch your head and wonder about the mysteries of this old continent. Tucked away in the Dreamtime stories, the sacred narratives that form the backbone of Aboriginal culture, there are tales that some reckon might be echoes of that ancient watery world and its incredible inhabitants. Uncle Walter Marks, a Gamilaroi elder who knows more about the old stories than most university professors know about their textbooks, once told me something that still gives me goosebumps when I think about it. He said the old people spoke of a time when water covered the land, when the great spirit serpents carved out the rivers and shaped the hills, and when creatures with necks as long as emus and teeth bigger than the finest boomerangs moved through those primordial waters. Now, most scientists would tell you it's impossible for stories to survive 100 million years, and they're probably right. The gap in time is wider than the distance between here and the moon. But there's something about these tales that makes an old bushman wonder if maybe, just maybe, there's more to the story than meets the eye. Dr. Emily Thornton, an anthropologist who spent her career studying how traditional knowledge and modern science can dance together like partners at a country ball, offers a fascinating perspective on this puzzle. She points out that many Dreamtime stories describe geological features with uncanny accuracy, tales of volcanoes in places where volcanic activity stopped tens of thousands of years ago, stories of landscape changes that modern geology has only recently confirmed. It's not that the stories preserve direct memories of the Eromanga Sea, she reckons, but rather that over thousands of years, Aboriginal people observing fossils exposed by natural erosion might have incorporated these ancient remains into their traditional narratives. And fair dinkum, when you think about it, that makes perfect sense. These are people with the keenest eyes for detail you'll ever find, folks who can read the land like a book written in a language the rest of us have forgotten. The truth is, fossils from the Eromanga Sea don't stay buried forever. Every big rain, every flood, every season of wind and weather exposes new specimens, weathering out of the rock like ancient secrets finally ready to be told. Uncle Walter once showed me a place about 3 days' walk from his community, where the stones have shapes that look like bones, but bones from creatures no living person has ever seen. The old people called them the remains of beings that lived in the world before it was dreamed into its current form. And when you see these fossils emerging from the red earth, gleaming like ivory in the desert sun, you start to understand how such stories might have been born. In 2019, something remarkable happened that showed how traditional knowledge and modern science can work together like two hands on the same body. A team of paleontologists working near Winton in Queensland made a significant discovery of plesiosaur remains. But they found the site thanks to local Aboriginal stories about serpent bones in the rock. Dr. Richard Murray, who was part of that expedition, said it was a humbling experience watching how knowledge passed down through generations could lead modern scientists to discoveries they might never have made on their own. For the traditional owners, it wasn't just a fossil site. It was a place of deep cultural significance, a location where the ancient and modern worlds intersected in ways that made everyone involved step back and think about the different ways of knowing this land. Then there are the bunyip stories, tales of fearsome water creatures that lurk in deep billabongs and swamps, beings described in various ways, but often featuring long necks, massive teeth, or other characteristics that sound remarkably similar to the marine reptiles of the Eromanga. Now, I'm not saying these stories are literal descriptions of plesiosaurs or pliosaurs. That'd be madder than a wombat in a washing machine. But when you hear Aboriginal elders describe creatures from the water with necks like serpents and teeth like spears, and then you see the fossils of exactly such beasts emerging from the rocks, well, it makes you wonder about the deep connections between land, story, and memory that go far beyond what any textbook can explain. Dr. Thornton is careful to point out that we mustn't impose our Western interpretations on Aboriginal narratives. These stories have their own complex meanings and cultural contexts that deserve respect. But she also notes how fascinating it is when different ways of understanding the natural world seem to arrive at similar observations about the deep history written in stone. What we do know for certain is that both modern paleontology and traditional Aboriginal knowledge recognize a fundamental truth about this continent. The land holds memories of ancient times, of worlds that existed long before our current reality. Sometimes these memories surface as fossils weathering out of cliffsides, sometimes as stories told around campfires for countless generations. The Eromanga Sea may have vanished into the mists of deep time, but its influence continues to ripple through the present like waves on an invisible shore, connecting us to mysteries that are still being revealed. One fossil at a time, one story at a time, one moment of wonder at a time. Now, if you think those ancient stories are something, wait until you hear about what's been happening in the last couple of decades. It's like the bloody Outback has suddenly decided to open up its treasure chest and start flinging fossils at anyone with a keen eye and a decent shovel. The interior of Australia has become a paleontologist's playground, mate, and I'm not talking about your average weekend fossicking. I'm talking about discoveries that are rewriting the textbooks and making scientists around the world sit up and take notice faster than a dingo hearing a dinner bell. It all started getting serious around 2004, when a cocky named Stuart Mackenzie was out on his property near Eromanga. That's a tiny town in Queensland with barely 45 souls, smaller than most pub crowds on a Friday night. And he stumbled across what looked like the mother of all bones sticking out of the red dirt. Now, Stuart wasn't a scientist, just a bloke trying to make a living off the land, but he had enough sense to know that when you find a bone bigger than a fence post, you don't use it to prop up the gate. What Stuart had found turned out to be part of a titanosaur, one of those massive, long-necked dinosaurs that used to munch on the vegetation around the edges of the Eromanga Sea like oversized lawnmowers. But here's where it gets interesting, Cobber. That single discovery turned Stuart and his Mrs. Robin into accidental fossil hunters, and their little property became the site of the Eromanga Natural History Museum, which is now one of the most important paleontological research centers in the Southern Hemisphere. Robin Mackenzie, who's got more passion for ancient bones than most people have for their morning coffee, reckons that first find changed their lives completely. One day they were cattle farmers. The next, they were custodians of creatures that died 100 million years ago. The thing about the Australian outback is that it's perfect for preserving fossils. The dry climate means less vegetation to hide things, and the constant weathering exposes new specimens every time there's a decent storm. Dr. Benjamin Harris from the University of Adelaide puts it beautifully when he says the Eromanga Sea created perfect conditions for fossilization: cold waters, low oxygen levels, and rapid burial in sediment, like nature's own version of a prehistoric pickle jar. The real game changer came in 2022, near Richmond in Queensland, when they uncovered something that had paleontologists around the world losing their minds with excitement: an almost complete elasmosaurid plesiosaur, including that rarest of prizes, an intact skull. Now, finding a complete plesiosaur skull is like finding a needle in a haystack the size of Uluru. It just doesn't happen very often because these things are more fragile than a spider's web in a cyclone. But this beauty, nicknamed Molly by the team that found her, was preserved so perfectly that you could still see the individual teeth in her massive jaws. Dr. Jessica Wong, who's been painstakingly cleaning and preparing Molly for study, describes the process like putting together a three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle where every piece is 100 million years old and more valuable than a Sydney harbourfront mansion. They use everything from industrial excavators to acupuncture needles to carefully extract these fossils from the rock. It's like performing surgery on stone, and one wrong move can destroy millions of years of perfectly preserved history. The technology they're using these days would make your head spin faster than a willy-willy in a wheat field. CT scanners, 3D modeling, molecular analysis that can tell you what these creatures had for their last meal. Dr. Harris and his team can now peer inside fossilized skulls and reconstruct the brains of creatures that died when the world was young, giving us insights into how these ancient predators thought and hunted. They've found evidence of parenting behavior in some species, with adults apparently protecting their young in shallow nursery areas, just like modern whales do today. In 2023, near Boulia, they discovered what can only be described as an ichthyosaur kindergarten, with more than 24 juvenile fossils all clustered together like they were having a prehistoric playdate when disaster struck. It's the kind of discovery that makes you realize these weren't just mindless killing machines. They were complex animals with social behaviors and family structures that echo through the eons to the creatures we share our oceans with today. But here's what really gets my blood pumping about these modern discoveries. It's not just the university types making the big finds. Some of the most significant fossils are being discovered by ordinary folks, farmers and graziers who know their land better than any textbook ever could. There's something beautifully democratic about fossil hunting in the outback. You don't need a PhD to spot a bone weathering out of a creek bank. You just need sharp eyes and the wisdom to know when you've found something special. Local communities are getting trained up as amateur paleontologists, learning how to properly excavate and preserve their finds, creating a network of fossil hunters across the continent that's more effective than any government program. Robin Mackenzie has a vision for the future that's as big as the outback itself. She wants to see every rural school kid in Australia trained to recognize and protect fossils, creating a generation of young people who understand that they're walking on the bones of dragons. The beauty of all this modern fossil hunting is that we're not just finding new species. We're uncovering entire ecosystems, complete food webs that show us how life worked in the Eromanga Sea. Every fossil tells a story, and when you put all those stories together, you get a picture of a world that was both alien and familiar. A place where the fundamental rules of life, eat or be eaten, adapt or die, played out on a scale that makes modern nature documentaries look like amateur hour. The discoveries keep coming, mate, and each one adds another piece to the puzzle of Australia's ancient past. As I sit here by the fire, looking out at the red dirt and thinking about all those creatures sleeping beneath our feet, I can't help but wonder what tomorrow's rain might wash out of the rocks, what new monsters might emerge from the earth to tell us their stories. The Eromanga Sea may be long gone, but its secrets are still rising from the dust. One fossil at a time, one discovery at a time, one moment of pure wonder at a time. Now here's where things get a bit spooky, and I mean the kind of spooky that makes even an old bushman like me check twice before heading out into the scrub at night. You see, those ancient sea monsters from the Eromanga aren't just sleeping quietly in their rocky graves. Oh no, mate, they're still walking among us in ways that'd make your hair stand on end. I'm talking about the modern descendants of those prehistoric titans, the living ghosts that carry the bloodline of creatures that once ruled an inland ocean bigger than most countries. Take a squiz at a saltwater crocodile basking on a riverbank up north, and you're looking at a direct descendant of the archosaurs that shared the Eromanga waters with our marine reptiles. These salties, That's what we call our saltwater crocs, the big fellas that can grow longer than a utility truck and have a bite force that'd crush a car engine. They're living fossils, virtually unchanged since the days when their ancestors watched plesiosaurs glide through the ancient waters. But it's not just the crocs that carry these ancient genes, Cobber. Every time you see a sea turtle paddling through the surf, you're witnessing a creature whose lineage goes back to the Eromanga Sea and beyond. Dr. Patricia Newman, a marine biologist who spent more time underwater than most fish, once told me something that still gives me the shivers. She reckons that when you watch a leatherback turtle diving into the deep blue, its movements are almost identical to what we think the plesiosaurs would have looked like. Those four flippers working in perfect harmony, that graceful underwater flight that seems to defy physics. It's like watching a ghost from the Cretaceous period come back to life. The genetic memory runs so deep that some scientists reckon certain behaviors we see in modern marine animals might be echoes of survival strategies that evolved in the Eromanga Sea itself. It's as if the ocean never forgot the lessons learned in that ancient inland water, and every creature that swims today carries a little bit of that prehistoric wisdom in its bones. Speaking of bones, here's something that'll make you think twice about that morning swim at the beach. Some of the sharks cruising our modern oceans are practically living time machines. The great white shark, that apex predator that makes even the toughest lifeguards think twice about a paddle, has been around for roughly 16 million years, but its ancestors were already perfecting the art of being a perfectly designed killing machine back when the Eromanga Sea was still lapping at the shores of ancient Australia. Dr. Marcus Thompson, who studies prehistoric sharks and has more courage than sense when it comes to swimming with the modern versions, explained to me once that shark evolution essentially hit the jackpot early and decided to stick with what worked. The basic body plan, the sensory systems, the hunting strategies, they're all refinements of designs that were already terrorizing the Eromanga waters when our marine reptiles were still the new kids on the block. But here's where it gets really interesting, and I mean stranger than fiction interesting. There are creatures living in our oceans today that some reckon might be more than just descendants of ancient sea life. I'm talking about the deep-sea monsters that occasionally surface in fishing nets or wash up on beaches, creatures so bizarre and primitive-looking that they seem like they've been hiding in the deep trenches since the Cretaceous period, waiting for the right moment to show themselves. The frilled shark, for instance, looks like something that should have died out with the dinosaurs. It's got an eel-like body, primitive gills, and a mouth full of teeth that wouldn't look out of place on a prehistoric predator. When Japanese fishermen first started pulling these things up from the deep Pacific, they thought they'd caught a sea serpent, and to be honest, I can't blame them. The bloody thing looks like it swam straight out of the Eromanga Sea and into the 21st century. Then there's the whole business of sea serpent sightings that still happen around the Australian coast. Stories that make even the most skeptical scientists scratch their heads and wonder if maybe, just maybe, something from the deep past is still lurking in our modern oceans. Old-timers along the coast have been reporting long-necked creatures surfacing in deep water for generations, descriptions that sound remarkably similar to the plesiosaurs we've been digging up from the Eromanga deposits. Now, I'm not saying there's a family of prehistoric marine reptiles playing hide-and-seek in the Tasman Sea, but I am saying that the ocean covers more than 70% of our planet's surface, and we've explored less than 5% of it. If something wanted to stay hidden down there in the deepest trenches, it'd have plenty of room to do so, and the deep ocean is about as close to prehistoric conditions as you can get in the modern world. The truth is, mate, the line between the ancient and the modern isn't as clear-cut as most people think. Every time we dive beneath the waves, we're entering a world that's remarkably similar to the one that existed when the Eromanga Sea teemed with life. The same laws of physics, the same predator-prey relationships, the same evolutionary pressures that shaped those ancient monsters are still at work today. It's like the ocean is a living museum where the past and present exist side by side, where modern creatures carry the genetic memories of their prehistoric ancestors, and where the ghosts of the Eromanga Sea still influence the rhythm of life in ways we're only beginning to understand. As I sit here watching the firelight dance on the red rocks around us, I can't help but think that those ancient titans aren't really gone. They're just wearing different faces, swimming in different seas, but carrying the same wild spirit that once ruled an inland ocean in the heart of Australia. So here we are, cobbers, sitting around this fire under the southern stars, and I reckon it's time to bring this yarn full circle, like a boomerang finding its way back to the hand that threw it. You see, the story of the Eromanga Sea isn't really a story about the past at all. It's a story about the eternal dance of deep time, the way this ancient continent keeps reinventing itself while never quite forgetting where it came from. Every morning, when the sun rises over the red center and sets fire to the horizon, it's illuminating the same landscape that once reflected off the waves of that prehistoric ocean. But now, it's painting a different picture entirely. The water may be gone, but the memory of it lives on in every grain of sand, every weathered rock, every fossil that emerges from the earth like a message from the deep past. It's as if the continent itself is a living thing, breathing slowly over millions of years, inhaling oceans and exhaling deserts, constantly transforming but never losing its essential character. What gets me most about this whole business is how it changes the way you look at the world around you. When you're out here in the scrub, maybe fixing a fence or checking on cattle, and you spot a piece of rock that looks a bit odd, you start to wonder if you're holding the tooth of a Kronosaurus or the vertebra of a Plesiosaur. Every creek bed becomes a potential fossil site, every eroded hillside a possible window into the Cretaceous period. The landscape stops being just dirt and rocks and starts being a library written in stone, with chapters that go back further than human memory can reach. And the beautiful thing is, this story is still being written. Every rain that falls, every wind that blows, every season that passes is adding new pages to the book while simultaneously revealing old ones that have been hidden for millions of years. The Aboriginal people understood this better than anyone, I reckon. They knew that the land was alive with stories, that every feature had meaning, that the present and the past were connected in ways that went deeper than most people could imagine. When they talked about the dream time, they weren't just talking about ancient history, they were talking about the eternal now, the way all times exist simultaneously in the landscape if you know how to read the signs. Those fossil bones sticking out of the rocks weren't just curiosities to them, they were proof that the world had been dreamed into many different forms, that the land itself was a shapeshifter capable of being ocean one day and desert the next. It's a way of thinking that modern science is only just beginning to appreciate, this idea that time isn't a straight line, but a spiral constantly circling back on itself while moving forward into unknown territory. And that's the real treasure of the Eromanga Sea, mate. Not the fossils themselves, impressive as they are, but the way they change our understanding of time and change, and the incredible resilience of life itself. Those marine reptiles that once ruled the inland ocean didn't just disappear when the waters receded. They evolved, adapted, found new ways to survive in a changing world. Their genetic legacy lives on in the creatures that share our planet today, and their story reminds us that nothing in this world is permanent except change itself. The same forces that created the Eromanga Sea are still at work today, still shaping the continent, still determining what Australia will look like 1,000,000 years from now. We're just temporary visitors in this ongoing story, privileged to witness one brief moment in the eternal dance of deep time. But here's the thing that really gets my blood pumping. We're not just observers of this story, we're participants in it. Every fossil we dig up, every discovery we make, every story we tell around fires like this one, we're adding our own chapter to the grand narrative of this ancient continent. The Eromanga Sea may be gone, but its influence ripples through everything we do, every choice we make about how to treat the land, how to understand our place in the vast sweep of geological time. When young people learn about these prehistoric monsters, they're not just learning about the past, they're learning about the future, about the kind of world we're creating for the creatures that will inherit this continent long after we're gone. The fossil hunters and paleontologists working in the outback today are the modern equivalent of the traditional storytellers, keeping the memory of the ancient world alive while adding new chapters to the ongoing saga of life on Earth. So the next time you're out in the bush, mate, take a moment to really look around you. Feel the wind that once carried the spray from Eromanga waves. Touch the rocks that once formed the bottom of that ancient sea. Listen to the silence that's filled with the echoes of creatures that died millions of years ago, but whose stories are still being told. This red dirt under your feet isn't just soil. It's the transformed remains of an ocean floor, a graveyard of titans, a treasure chest of secrets that we're only just beginning to unlock. The Eromanga Sea lives on in every sunset that paints the sky the color of deep water, every storm that reminds us of the power of ancient tempests, every moment of wonder when we realize that we're walking on the bones of dragons. The ghosts of the Eromanga will always be with us, swimming through our dreams, surfacing in our discoveries, reminding us that this land holds mysteries deeper than any ocean, stories older than any human memory, and wonders that will outlast us all. And that, cobbers, is a story worth telling around every fire, under every star, for as long as there are people left to listen and wonder at the incredible journey of life on this ancient, ever-changing, eternally surprising continent we call home.